There are many places in the world that are well known for their natural beauty of historical importance, but there are also places that are remembered for something far more unusual, something that do not fit easily into what we normally expect. The Bermuda Triangle is one of those places. It is not defined by a single landmark or a clear boundary, but rather by a collection of stories that have been told and retold over time. Story about ships that never arrived, aircraft that lost contact, and journey that ended without clear explanation. At first, this story may sound like something created for entertainment, something designed to capture attention and create a sense of mystery. However, when we begin to look more closely, we find that many of these accounts are connected to real events. Records exist of vessels that disappeared during travel, a flight that encountered an unexpected difficulty, and of situation where communication was lost without a clear reason. Why each case had its own detail, the fact that so many of them are associated with the same general reason that had led to a question that continued to be asked. Why this play? The area commonly referred to as the Bermuda Triangle lies within a Atlantic Ocean that is heavily traveled. Ships and aircraft pass through it regularly as part of major roads connecting different parts of the world. Because of this, it is not unusual for incidents to occur there, just as they do in other busy regions. However, what makes the Bermuda Triangle different is not only the number of events, but the way they have been connected and interpreted. Over time, individual incidents began to be grouped together, forming a pattern that seemed to suggest something unusual about the region itself. A ship lost at sea, a flight that failed to return, a sudden loss of navigation. Each event added another piece to the larger narrative. As more stories were shared, the idea of the Bermuda Triangle became more defined, not through official boundary, but through repetition and recognition. This process is important because it shows how a concept can develop over time. What begins as separate event can rarely become a single idea, especially when those events are similarity or occur in the same area. Once that idea takes hold, it can influence how future events are understood, making them seem connected even when they may have a different cost. At the same time, the ocean itself add another layer to mystery. The Atlantic is vast and constantly changing, with weather pattern, current, and environmental conditions that can shift quickly. Even with modern technology, it is not a way possible to predict or control these changes completely. Is in earlier periods when navigation tools were less advanced, the challenge were even greater, making travel more uncertain and increasing the likelihood of unexpected situations. The combination of real event, environmental factor, and human interpretation has shaped the way the Bermuda Triangle is understood today. It is not simply a location on a map, but a concept built from experience and storytelling. Some view it as a place where natural conditions create unusual challenges, while others see it as something that had not been yet fully explained. This leads to a deeper question that goes beyond any single event. Is the Bermuda Triangle truly different from other regions, or it is an example of how patterns can be created from the way information is collected and shared? When we hear multiple stories that seem similar, it is natural to look for a connection, even if that connection is not immediately clear. In order to understand this, it is necessary to look at the topic from multiple perspectives. Historical record can show how the idea developed, scientific analysis can explain environmental factor, and human perception can reveal how belief influence reinterpretation. Each of these perspectives adds something to the overall picture, helping to more beyond the surface of the mystery. What makes the Bermuda Triangle especially Interesting is that it does not provide a simple answer. Instead, it exists a space where different explanations overlap. Some events can be explained clearly, while others remain uncertain. This balance between known and unknown is what keeps the topic relevant even as knowledge continues to grow. Rather than being a single mystery waiting to be solved, the Bermuda Triangle can be seen as a collection of questions, each connected to the other in different ways. It represents not only the challenge of travel and navigation, but also the way humans respond to uncertainty. When something cannot be fully explained, it's often become part of a larger story, one that continues to evolve over time. And it is within the story that the idea of planets vanishing take on its meaning, not only as an event, but as part of the broader narrative about the unknown, narrative that invite exploration, encourage curiosity, and remind us that even in a world filled with information, there are still things that are not completely understood. One, background and origins. To understand how Bermuda Triangle became known as one of the most mysterious regions in the world, it is important to look at how the idea developed over time rather than assuming it appeared all at once. The concept did not begin with a single event or a clear definition, but instead formed gradually through a series of incidents, reports, and interpretations that were later connected into a larger narrative. In the early days of sea travel, long before modern navigation systems exist, the ocean was both a pathway and a challenge, offering opportunities for trade and exploration, while also presenting risks that were not always predictable. Ships traveling across the Atlantic relies on basic tool, experience, and observation to determine their position and direction. Weather conditions could change quickly, and communication between vessels was limited or non-existent over long distance. If a ship failed to arrive at its destination, there were often very few clues to explain what had happened. These incidents were recorded when possible, but without detailed information. They remain unresolved, becoming part of a glowing list of unexplained events at sea. As time passed and travel increased, one of these incidents were noted, particularly in regions that were heavily used for navigation. The area now associated with the Bermuda Triangle was one of these regions, not because it was isolated, but because it was frequently crossed by ships moving between major locations. This high level of activity naturally increased the number of recorded incidents, but all the time, there was still viewed as separate event rather than part of a single mystery. The situation began to change with the development of aviation, as aircraft started to travel over long distance, including routes across the Atlantic. New types of challenges appear. Pilots have to rely on navigation systems that were still developing, and environmental factors such as weather, visibility, and equipment limitation could affect the ability to maintain course. In some cases, aircraft experienced difficulty that led to loss of communication or unexpected change in direction. Unlike earlier maritime incidents, not all of this situation could be fully explained. What made the Bermuda Triangle concept unique was not simply the existence of these events, but the way they were later grouped together. As reports accumulate, certain writers and researchers began to notice that a huge number of unexplained incidents seem to occur within the same general region. This observation led to the idea that the area itself might be significant, rather than each event being entirely independent. Over time, this interpretation was shared and repeated, gradually shaping public perception. The naming of Bermuda Triangle played an important role in this process. Once an area was identified and given the specific name, it became easier to connect new incidents to the same idea. A defined concept allowed people to organize information in a way that made the pattern more visible, even if the individual case had different causes. This is a common way in which narratives are formed, where separate pieces of information are brought together under a single framework that gives them a shared meaning. It is also important to consider how storytelling influenced the development of this concept. As account of disappearance and unusual event were shared, certain details were emphasized to make the story more engaging and memorable. Over time, this detail became part of the standard description of the Bermuda Triangle, reinforcing its reputation as a place where things do not always happen as expected. This does not mean that the events themselves were not real, but rather than the way they were presented play a role in shaping how they were understood. Another factor that contributes to the origins of Bermuda Triangle is the natural complexity of the region itself. The Atlantic Ocean in this area is influenced by multiple environment systems, including currents, weather patterns, and geographic features. These elements interact in ways that can create challenging conditions for navigation, especially for those who are not fully prepared or who are relying on limited information. In earlier periods, when knowledge of these systems was less developed, such conditions could easily lead to confusion or error. As more information became available and technology improved, it became possible to analyze these factors in greater detail. However, by this time, the idea of Bermuda Triangle had already become established. The combination of historical incidents, environmental challenges, and the way information was organized and shared has created a lasting concept that continues to attract attention. What made the origin of Bermuda Triangle particularly interesting is that it's not based on a single mystery, but on many smaller events that were brought together over time. Each incident contributes something to the overall story, but none of them alone fully define it. Instead, it is the accumulation of events combined with interpretation and repetition that gives the concept its strength. In this way, the Bermuda Triangle can be seen as both a real place and an idea. The location exists with all of these natural conditions and challenges, but the mystery associated with it is shaped by how those conditions and events has been understood. It reflects the way humans look for patterns, connect information, and create meaning from experience that were not always fully clear. By examining the background and origin of Bermuda Triangle, it's become easier to see how a collection of separate incidents could evolve into one of the most well-known mysteries in the world. It is not simply a story of disappearance, but a story of how information is gathered, interpreted, and shared over time, gradually forming a narrative what continue to influence how new events are perceived. Two famous disappearances. As the idea of Bermuda Triangle began to take shape, certain incidents became more widely discussed than others, not necessarily because they were most unusual, but because they contained elements that captured attention and raised questions that were difficult to answer. These cases, often repeated in articles, books, and documentaries, help define how reasons were perceived, turning individual events into central example of a larger mystery. One of the most well-known cases involved a group of military training aircraft that disappeared during a routine flying over Atlantic. The mission itself was not considered dangerous, and the pilot were trained and familiar with the port routes they were following. However, during the flight, reports indicate that pilot began experiencing confusion with the navigation instrument. They were uncertain of their exact position and struggled to identify the landmark that could help them return to base. Communication became increasingly unclear, and eventually contact was lost despite search efforts. No confirmed trace of aircraft was found at the time, leaving the situation unresolved. This case became especially important because it combines several elements that are often associated with Bermuda Triangle, including instrument confusion, loss of direction, and certain disappearance. Over time, it was presented as a key example of something unusual occurring in the region. However, When examined more closely, there are also possible explanations involving navigation challenge, weather condition, and the limitation of the technology available at that time. The lack of definitive conclusion has allowed the story to remain open, contributing to its continued relevance. There are also reports of ships that were discovered under unusual circumstances, sometimes found without clear sign of what happens during the journey. In some accounts, vessels were located with no immediate indication of damage, yet without a full explanation of the event that led to their condition. This situation added another layer to narrative, suggesting that not all incidents could be easily understood through typical causes such as storm or mechanical failure. At the same time, many other disappearances attributed to the Bermuda Triangle, involve cases where a vessel or aircraft were lost without any recovery. In such situation, the absence of physical evidence make it difficult to determine exactly what occurred. The ocean is bad even with the modern search methods, locating debris or remain can be challenging. Especially strong currents are involved. This lack of information often leads to speculation as people attempt to fill in the gap left by incomplete data. Another factor that contributes to the prominence of this case is the way they are presented. When an event includes elements such as sudden loss of communication, unclear final message, or unexpected change in direction, it naturally draw attention. This detail creates a sense of mystery, even if they can be explained through no factor and when analyzed carefully. Over time, repeated retelling can be emphasized the more unusual aspect, making the event appear more mysterious than it may have originally been. It is also important to recognize that not all incidents within the region are well known. Many events are documented in official record but do not receive the same level of attention, often because there were clearer explanation or lack dramatic detail. This difference in visibility can create an imbalance where only the most mysterious cases are remembered, reinforcing the idea that reason is uniquely dangerous or unexplained. In addition, the timing of these reports helped play a role in shaping the narrative. As communication and media coverage expanded, story of disappearance became more accessible to wider audience. This allowed certain cases to gain international attention, further strengthening the association between the reason and the idea of mystery. Once this story became widely known, they influenced how future events were interpreted, creating a pattern where new incidents were quickly connected to the same concept. Despite the attention these cases have received, it is important to approach them with a balanced perspective. Each incident had its own context, including environmental condition, technical factor, and human decision. In some detail may remain unclear, this does not necessarily mean that they are beyond explanation. In many cases, the combination of limited information and challenging conditions is enough to account for the outcome, even if every detail cannot be confirmed. At the same time, the continued interest in these disappearances show that they serve as a larger purpose in the overall story of the Bermuda Triangle. They provide specific example that people can focus on, making the idea more concrete and easier to understand. Without this case, the concept might remain abstract, but with them, it becomes something that feels more real and more immediate. In the end, the famous disappearance associated with the Bermuda Triangle are not only about what happened, but also about how those events have been remembered and interpreted. They highlight the way individual incidents can be connected into a broader narrative, shaping the perception and influence how reason is understood over time. While the details of each case may differ, together they form a pattern that continues to raise questions, encouraging further exploration into what's lie behind the mystery. 3. Natural explanation. As the story surrounding the Bermuda Triangle continued to spread, researchers, scientists began to look more closely at the reason in order to understand whether natural factor could explain the event that had been reported over time. Instead of focusing on mystery alone, this approach examined physical environment, asking how weather, ocean condition, and geography might influence travel through area. What emerged from this result was not a single cause, but a combination of factors that, when considered together, could account for many of incidents associated with the region. One of the most important elements to consider is weather. The Atlantic Ocean, particularly in the area commonly associated with Bermuda Triangle, is known for its rapidly changing condition. Storm can develop with little warning, and ship and wind patterns can create unexpected challenge for both ship and aircraft. In earlier period, when forecasting was limited, travelers often relied on direct observation rather than advanced prediction models. This makes it more difficult to prepare for sudden change, increasing the likelihood of encountering dangerous conditions without sufficient time to report. In addition to large-scale storms, there are also smaller but still significant weather phenomena that can affect navigation. Sudden fog, heavy rain, and variation in visibility can make it difficult to maintain direction, especially when traveling over open water where there are few visual reference points. For aircrafts, changes in air and pressure and winds speed can influence stability and control, while for ships, strong wind and weight can add to cost and reduce maneuverability. This factor, while natural, can create situations that feel unusual or unpredictable, particularly when they occur unexpectedly. Another key factor is the role of ocean currents. The region includes powerful currents that move large volumes of water across the Atlantic. These currents can carry objects over long distance, sometimes far more than original allocation. In the case of a ship or aircraft incident, this movement can make it difficult to locate debris or evidence, even if the initial event is understood. As a result, an incident may appear to involve complete disappearance when in reality the physical remains have simply been displaced beyond the area of search. Navigation itself also presents challenges that are often underestimated. The Earth magnetic is not uniform, and certain areas experience variation that can affect compass reading. While these variations are generally small and accounted for in modern navigation systems, they may have greater impact in the past when instruments were less advanced. A slight error in direction when extended over a long distance can lead to a significant deviation from the intended route, increasing the risk of becoming lost. Geographical features beneath the ocean surface may also contribute to the complexity in the region. The seafloor in this area is not flat, but includes variation in depth and structure that can influence water movement. In some cases, gas trapped beneath the sea may possible factor in certain type of maritime incidents as they can temporarily affect one sea in a localized area. Even if these occurrences are rare, they add another layer to the range of natural conditions that exist within the region. It is also important to consider how these factors interact with each other. Weather, currents, and navigation challenges do not occur in isolation, but often combine in ways that can increase difficulty for those traveling through area. A sudden storm may reduce visibility, strong current may add to position, and minor navigation error may compound over time. When multiple factors are present at once, even the small issue that can develop into a larger problem, especially if there is a limited ability to communicate or adjust costs. In earlier periods, these challenges were even more significant due to the limitation of available technology. Navigation system were less precise, communication method was slower and less reliable, and real-time data about environmental conditions were limited. This means that once a problem began, it could be difficult to correct, increasing the likelihood of an incident that could not be easily explained after the effect. Modern technology had improved the ability to monitor and respond to these conditions, but it had not removed them entirely. The ocean remains a dynamic environment, and while many risks can now be managed more effectively, the possibility of unexpected situations still exists. This helps explain why the Bermuda Triangle continued to be associated with unusual events, even as understanding of the reason had increased. When these natural explanations are considered together, they provide a framework for understanding many of the incidents that have been linked to the Bermuda Triangle. Rather than requiring a single unusual cause, they show how a combination of no factors can produce outcomes that appear mysterious, especially when viewed without complete information. At the same time, the existence of this explanation does not eliminate the sense of curiosity that surrounds the reason. Instead, it shifts the focus from the idea of the unknown as something beyond explanation to the idea of the unknown as something that can be explored and understood over time. The mystery in this sense becomes less about whether something impossible had occurred and more about the complex system interact in ways that are not always immediately clear. In the end, the natural explanation for the Bermuda Triangle do not remove the fascination with the topic, but they do provide a clear way to understand it. They show that behind the story of disappearance, there are still environmental factors at work, shaping events in a way that can seem unusual, but are ultimately part of the natural world. 4. Human factors and perception. While natural conditions provide many explanations for the events associated with the Bermuda Triangle, they do not tell the full story of their own. Human factors play an equally important role, not only in how incidents occur, but also in how they are understood and remembered over time. Travel across the ocean, whether by ship or aircraft, has a way requiring a combination of skill, judgment, and awareness. And even under normal conditions, small error can lead to the significant consequence, especially when there are few reference points and limited opportunities for correction. Navigation is one of the more critical aspects of this process. In earlier period, both pilot and sailor rely on instruments that require interpretation and constant adjustment. Even with experience, it was possible to misread data, misunderstanding positioning, or make decisions based on incomplete information. Over long distance, a minor miscalculation in direction could gradually lead to a much larger deviation from the intended route. In an environment like open ocean, where there are no visible landmarks, such error could go unnoticed until they became difficult to correct. Communication is another key factor. Today, real-time communication allows for constant update, guidance, and support, but in the past, these were not always available. Message could be delayed, unclear, or lost entirely, especially during poor weather conditions. If a vessel or aircraft encountered difficulty and was unable to communicate effectively, it would become much harder for others to understand the situation or respond in time. This lack information often contributes to the sense of mystery, as incomplete communication leaves gaps that are difficult to fill. Human decision making is also play a role, particularly in situations where conditions are changing quickly. Pilot and crew members must interpret information, assess risk, and choose how to respond, sometimes within a very short period of time. These decisions are influenced by experience, training, and the information available at the moment, but they are not always perfect. In complex environments, even a reasonable decision can lead to unexpected outcome, especially in multiple factors that are involved at once. Fatigue and stress are additional elements that that can affect performance. Long journey, challenging condition, and the responsibility of maintaining safety can place significant pressure on individual. Under this circumstance, concentration may decrease, reaction time may slow, and the ability to process information may be reduced. These effects are not always visible, but they can influence how situations are handled, increasing the risk of error. Perception is another important aspect to consider, not only for those directly involved in an event, but also for those who later interpret it. Human perception is not perfectly objective, but and it is often influenced by expectation, prior knowledge, and belief. When people hear about a play, know of an unusual event, they may be more likely to interpret new information in a way that aligns with that idea. This can affect how incidents are reported, remembered, and shared. Over time, this process can create a feedback loop. Story of disappearance and unusual event contribute to the reputation of Bermuda Triangle, and that reputation in turn influence how new events are understood. Even when incidents have clear explanation, they may still have be associated with the large narrative, reinforcing the idea that reason is uniquely mysterious. This does not mean that the events themselves are not real, but rather that their meaning is shaped by context. Media and storytelling have played a significant role in the process as well. As reports of incidents are shared, certain details may be emphasized to capture attention, while others may receive less focus. Over time, the repeated storytelling can highlight the most dramatic aspect, creating a version of event that feel more unusual than original situation. This does not necessarily involve intentional distortion, but rather than the natural tendency to focus on what is more memorable or engaging. It is also important to consider how incomplete information affects interpretation. When an incident occurs without clear evidence or confirmed explanation, it leaves space for speculation. In the absence of definitive answer, people may not propose different possibility, some based on no factor, other based on imagination or assumption. This range of interpretation contribute to the ongoing discussion, allowing the story to remain open rather than fully resolved. At the same time, modern analysts often provide clearer insight into many past incidents. With improved technology and a better understanding of environmental and human factors, it's possible to reconstruct events more accurately than before. However, not very detailed can always be confirmed. In some cases remain partially unresolved, which continue to support the sense of mystery. In the end, human factor and perception are essential to understanding the Bermuda Triangle, not only because they influence what happened, but because they shape how those events are interpreted. The combination of real challenges, decision making under pressure, and the way information is processed and shared create a complex picture that can go beyond any single explanation. Rather than existing at a play defined only by unusual event, the Bermuda Triangle can also be seen as an example of how human experience interact with uncertainty. It shows what we believe, what we observe, and how we interpret those observations all play a role in forming the story that continue to be told. 5. Theories and controversy. Even with detailed study of natural condition and a better understanding of human factor, the Bermuda Triangle continued to be surrounded by a wide range of theories, and it is within these different interpretations that the topic remains active and debated. While some explanations are grounded in science and supported by evidence, others take a more open approach, suggesting possibilities that go beyond what currently confirmed. This make a perspective can keep the discussion alive, allowing the Bermuda Triangle to exist not only as a location, but an ongoing question. One of the most widely accepted approach is that the event associated with Bermuda Triangle can be explained through a combination of environmental and human factors. According to this view, there's no single cause that defines the reason, but rather than a series of conditions that can, under certain circumstances, lead to unexpected outcomes. Weather patterns, ocean currents, and navigation challenges and human decision making all contribute to situations that may appear unusual when viewed without full context. This perspective emphasizes that the mystery is not the result of something unknown, but of multiple known factors interacting in complex way. At the same time, there are theories that focus on specific natural phenomena that may be less commonly discussed. Some researchers have explored the possibility that certain areas of the ocean could produce unusual conditions, such as sudden change in water density or localized disruption in the environment. While these ideas are still studied and debated, they are generally considered within the boundary of natural science, meaning they do not require anything beyond what is physically possible, even if they are not yet fully understood in very detail. There are also interpretations that place more emphasis on the role of perception and narrative. From the point of view, the Bermuda Triangle is not necessarily defined by the event themselves, but by how those events have been grouped together and presented over time. When multiple incidents are connected under a single name, it creates a sense of pattern and meaning they may not exist in the same way when each case is examined independently. This theory suggests that the mystery is shaped as much by storytelling as by the event it described. In contrast to this more grounded explanation, there are also ideas that explore possibility beyond current scientific understanding. Some of these theories suggest that there may be unknown forces or phenomena that have not yet been discovered or fully explained. While this perspective have often based on curiosity and imagination, rather than in evidence, they continue to attract attention because they offer an alternative way thinking about the unknown. Even without confirmation, they contribute to the overall discussion by expanding the range of possibility that people consider. The presence of such different theory naturally lead to controversy. On one side, there is a strong emphasis on evidence, testing, and repeatable result, which form the basis of scientific understanding. From this perspective, explanation must be supported by data, and without support, a theory cannot be accepted as valid. On the one side, there is a more open approach that allows for speculation and the exploration of ideas that may not yet be fully proven. This difference is approach create a divide, not necessarily because one side is entirely correct and the other is not, but because they operate under different way of evaluating information. Another aspect of the controversy comes from how information is selected and shared. Some account focused on most unusual and or unexplained detail, while others emphasize explanation that already know. Depending on which information is highlighted, the same event can appear either mysterious or understandable. This variation in presentation can influence public perception, shaping how the Bermuda Triangle is viewed by different audiences. Media and popular culture have so play a role in maintaining this sense of debate as stories are retold in documentaries, books, and online contexts, they often include elements that increase interest and engagement. While this helps keep the topic relevant, it can also blur the line between analysis and entertainment, making it more difficult to separate confirmed information from interpretation. Despite this difference, the ongoing discussion about the Bermuda Triangle reflects something broader about how people approach uncertainty. Some prefer clear explanation that reduce mystery, while others are drawn to the idea that there may still be things left to discover. The Bermuda Triangle exists between these perspectives, allowing both continue without fully reflecting other. In the end, the rhetoric and controversy surrounding the Bermuda Triangle are not only about the reason itself, but about how knowledge is formed and how questions are answered. They show that even when many explanations are available, the present uncertainty can keep topic alive, encouraging continued interest and discussion. Rather than reaching a final conclusion, the Bermuda Triangle remains a subject that invites different viewpoints, each adding another layer to the overall understanding, and it is this balance between explanation and possibility that continue to give the topic a lasting appeal. As we come to the end of exploration, the Bermuda Triangle remains a subject that is difficult to define with a single clear conclusion. After examining its origin, the historical incident, the natural explanation, and the role of human perception, it becomes clear that the mystery is not based on one unknown factor, but on the way many different elements come together over time. Each perspective adds a piece to the overall picture, but none of them fully reflect other, leaving the idea open rather than completely resolved. From a scientific point of view, many of the events associated with the reason can be explained through known environmental conditions and human factors. Weather patterns, or ocean currents, and navigation challenges, the decision making all play a role in shaping what happened during travel across the Atlantic. This explanation provides a structured way to understand the incident, reducing the need to rely on unknown causes. At the same time, they do not always answer very detail, especially in cases where information is limited or evidence is difficult to record. Looking at the topic from a historical perspective reveal how the idea from Bermuda Triangle developed through the accumulation of events and the way those events were recorded and shared. Individual incidents, one connected under a single concept, began to form a pattern that seemed meaningful, even if the connection between them were not always direct. Over time, this pattern became part of a larger narrative, influencing how new information was interpreted and understood. Human perception adds another layer to this understanding. The way people interpret events is not often shaped by expectation and prior knowledge. When a play becomes known of unusual occurrence, new incidents that may happen, they are more likely to be viewed through the same lens. This does not change the event themselves, but it does influence how they are remembered and discussed, reinforcing the overall idea of mystery. At the same time, it is important to recognize that the ocean remains one of the least fully understood environments on Earth. Even with modern technology, there are still areas where information is limited and conditions can change quickly. This does not mean that the Bermuda Triangle represents something beyond explanation, but it does suggest that not every detail of every event can always be fully reconstructed. The presence of uncertainty is a natural part of exploring complex systems, especially in environmental as vast and dynamic as the open ocean. Because of this, the Bermuda Triangle does not need to be seen as either completely mysterious or completely explained. Instead, it can be understood at a point where different ways of thinking meet. Scientific analysis provide clarifying historical context, show how the idea developed, and human perception explain why the story continues to attract attention. Together, these perspectives create a balanced view that allow the topic to remain both understandable and intriguing. What keeps the Bermuda Triangle relevant is not the certainty of what it is, but the question is continued to raise. This encourages people to look deeper, to compare explanation, and to consider how to knowledge change over time. In this way, it's become more than just location associated with unusual event. It's become an example of how humans respond to the unknown, using observation, reasoning, and storytelling to make sense of what they experience. In the end, the idea of planets vanishing is not only about the event themselves, but about how those events are interpreted and remembered. The Bermuda Triangle exists as both real play and a construct narrative, shaped by fact, assumption, and the natural human tendency to search for meaning in situations that are not immediately clear. And perhaps what gives the story its lasting power, not a final answer, but the space it leaves for interpretation, allowing each person to decide how much of the mystery is explained and how much remains open to the question.